Observed a B-52 bombing run from the inside. For security reasons, we are not identifying crew members or the location of their mission. It is a ritual that's been around as long as airplanes have been used for war. Pilots suiting up for combat.
It's my first one.
I've never actually launched a missile before.
I flew in Desert Storm.
This is my second sortie. I flew on the first strike.
These are B-52 crews, leaving for a cruise missile strike against Serbia and KosovA.
Feeling nervous at this stage?
A little bit. What's going through my mind is please don't let me mess up. I mean, this is where it counts.
1 wing, 2 wings.
Looks like a buff.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches.
Is that a special plane to you?
That looks good. We'll take that.
They'll be flying the youngest B-52s in the Air Force inventory.
Here, I'm actually one of the few guys around here that's older than these airplanes. I'm a 57 model, and these airplanes are 60 and 61 models.
I mean, there's people out there that, you know, could say that their grandfathers have flown B-52s.
Just making sure the launcher looks good and it's able to rotate.
It takes quite a while to get an airplane prepped, to get it refueled and loaded, and crew chiefs spend about 5 or 6 hours out here probably before we get here.
We check the oil, we do the tires and struts. Crew members like to think it's their plane, but we know it's our plane in our mind.
Last-minute maintenance problem solved. It's time to launch.
Pretty much every time anything heats up in any theater in the world, we're one of the very first assets that gets called for.
Well, the pucker factor is definitely there. You know, no matter how many times you say it's not.
You guys have a great flight, and I'll see you in the morning.
The planes, codenamed Havoc 1-1 and Havoc 1-2, are on their way.
We worked all day on the aircraft that we launched out this evening, and we just put our heart and soul into it, and then to see it take off, it's awesome to know that we made that possible.
Strut lead 2, can you recycle your beacon?
The B-52 flies like a Mack truck driving around a racetrack. It's a big aircraft, high-performance jet, 8 engines. It's a horse to fly the plane around.
It seems to me that the B-52 was designed before the whole concept of human ergonomics. So it's really designed to get bombs on target, not really for human comfort.
Well, his chicken bones been laying there for 40 years.
Your helmets get banged up, you get bruises sometimes. So.
Hey, Joe, could you bump the heat down a little bit? It's kind of hot back here.
I get around, and, you know, for a tall person like me, I you know, cramp myself in a little ball and, you know, do what I got to do to, you know, get comfortable.
But it's not glamour flying. It's not the pretty new airplanes, that's for sure.
Is he done talking for a bit or what?
I had an instructor one time tell me, boring is good. That means everything went as you wanted it to.
It will take the planes hours to get to the launch point.
It's a lot of just dead time followed by a couple minutes of terror. We build up to that 1 minute, as you saw, with about 3 or 4 hours worth of work checklist, building up to that 1 minute in preparation. That 1 minute is when we hit the peak of our day at work.
Both planes are getting ready.
My offense tells me that all our weapons are in the green and the airplane's in good shape. No problems whatsoever. Yeah, all missiles are powered up. We got missiles 1 through 7 are go armed. Missile 8 is go safe.
The lead airplane weapons, aircraft are functioning very well. Has all its weapons up and good.
But Havoc 1-1 will be the only plane to launch tonight, and they are told that they will fire only 2 of their 8 missiles. Havoc 1-2 gets worse news. They're to be backup.
Well, that means we won't launch anything probably, right?
Roger that.
Bummer.
Havoc 1-1 gets the call. Hammer. They are clear to launch. In the belly of the huge bomber, the Navigator bombardiers prepare to fire.
Transfer alignment maneuvers complete.
We've got the doors open.
We're making sure the airplane is on the right heading.
We have 60 seconds to go.
Wings level. The timing's right.
Down to 30 seconds to go.
The missile is ready to go.
About 5 seconds to go to launch. We go ahead and we launch the missile off, and it actually comes off the rail on time at 0. Went ahead and pressed the launch button, got the first missile out.
The first missile, as you saw, went off fine.
To the crew of Havoc 1-2, flying 3 miles behind, the missile launch is only a distant flash.
You can definitely feel the missile come off the airplane. It's almost like you were driving along and you hit a bump in the road. And I don't know that I can hear it, but it sure seems like I can hear a good ka-chunk too when it comes off. The airplane definitely does take a little bounce.
Yes, sir. 4-0.
4-0, Roger.
Havoc 1-1 counted down to the launch of its second missile. The launch button was punched, but this time the plane did not lurch. There was no sound. The weapons screen showed a hung missile. The missile was stuck in the bomb bay. When the second missile jammed in the bomb bay of Havoc 1-1, it meant they were out of the fight.
We got the call that aircraft number 1 had the hung missile.
These 2 will launch on 4-3. 30 TG.
All checklist, guys.
We're going to launch a missile.
The backup plane, Havoc 1-2, now has only about a minute to fire its missile before the launch window closes.
There was much rejoice, because at that point, I mean, we were just the spare. And, you know, when you guys lost the second missile, it's like, hey, you know, we're back in the fight and we can do it.
Okay, launch your text location station. Launch your missile. Stand by for launch. Launching now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Missile away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Deploy maneuver.
That was the first time I ever really got to launch a missile or drop weapons for real, you know, so it was very gratifying.
It's kind of like for an air crew making it to the World Series.
You know, you don't see where it goes, and I have no idea if it hit its mark or not.
I won't say that we're not concerned about the targets, but we're not like Marines out there sticking bayonets in the other guy's neck or whatever. We're standing off several hundred miles away and kind of not in touch with what our weapons are doing.
I feel that we are pretty darn isolated. We're not in real contact with the nitty-gritty that's going on the ground at all.
I don't think you can ever forget what you're really doing on these missions. It's definitely, you know, watching the news, it's not something you can just totally block out, but you can't think about everything. You have to think about the job that you're there to do, that you've promised to do. So you can't, but it's always in the back of your mind. You never can totally detach yourself.
The 2 bombers turn for their long flight home. By the time the aircraft approach England, the sun is starting to come up. The missile is still jammed in the bomb bay of Havoc 1-1. The crew doesn't think it will interfere with their landing, but there is enough uncertainty that they decide to let Havoc 1-2 land first. They will then declare an emergency and follow them in.
And then, of course, there's the lovely English weather to fly through.
We've got a lot of crosswinds, and it makes it really hard, especially in a B-52, because the wings are so large and they've swept really low. So, I mean, there's really a lot of things that you have to be careful of.
The instrument landing system at the airbase is malfunctioning, and when Havoc 1-2 finally breaks through the clouds on approach to the runway, they are in trouble.
When we broke out of the clouds, and I really didn't like what I saw. We were a little too far off to the left side.
We saw that, you know, hey, this isn't looking too good, so we took it around, not to push a bad position.
Back on Havoc 1-1, the pilots hear that the lead plane aborted its landing, only adding to their concern. But Havoc 1-2 makes it in on their second try. And Havoc 1-1 is cleared for landing. Finally, breaking through the clouds, Havoc 1-1 makes it in. To be met by a fleet of emergency vehicles. With the plane parked on the runway, maintenance crews come up to inspect the missile. which they are afraid might be resting on the closed bomb bay doors. But when they can finally see it, it is safely in the rack, and Havoc 1-1 is cleared. The mission was a success. Every member of the crews is now a veteran.
I don't think I'm different. I certainly, I probably won't be able to tell you accurately right now, just still kind of reeling from the dehydration and the fatigue. I'll have to get back to you in a couple days or a couple months or a couple years.
The thing that I like most about it, I guess, is I don't have a job where I go to work and wear a tie from 9 to 5 every day. I'm doing something different just about every day of the week.
It's something that we always train for, and the chance to get out and actually do what we train for all the time, it's really gratifying, and I'm really proud to be able to say that I've been there and got a chance to lay it on the line, so to speak, and do what we prepare for all the time.
This morning, Serbian television announced that missiles hit several targets near Pristina.
You know that for real, when you're launching that missile, it's going somewhere, that missile is going to serve a purpose. It's military. It's going to destroy things. It's going to hurt people if they're in the way. So that weighs on your mind a little bit, and about the best you can do, given our duty and everything, we're obligated to our duty, about the best you can do is to just say a prayer for the people and hope for the best for them.
We will be joined by a distinguished officer and former combat aviator, Admiral Leighton Smith, when we come back. From 1995 through 1996. Admiral, let me just, if I may, probe your strategic and tactical thinking. In general, we're now 6 days into this. What do you think?
Well, I think from everything I can gather, the military part of the operation is going pretty much as expected. And I think they're hitting the targets they're intended to hit. You opened the program with a comment about some obvious collateral damage. Those are very, very hard to take kinds of events, but not totally unexpected. I think we need to understand that when there are that many bombs flying through the air, that there are going to be unintended consequences, and some of them are obviously terrible, and I'm quite certain that every person in uniform regrets those kinds of incidents.
Well, if things are going militarily as expected, why are so many people so concerned?
Well, I think, first of all, there may be some impatience. For those of us who've seen the integrated air defense and the kinds of targets and the kinds of problems that we deal with in that part of the world, I think that we simply cannot be too impatient with respect to the effects of the military operations. It's going to take a while to kind of clean up some of the integrated air defense, hit some of the strategic targets, and we've all known that weather and terrain are two very major problems, and I think those are going to prove to be the case as we go through this process.
Well, I suppose no one is more impatient than the ethnic Albanians because they are taking the brunt of this. And here, I think, is what a lot of people are saying is the real problem. Milosevic has decided to exacerbate the issue by attacking the ethnic Albanians strenuously. And there is not much, if anything, that the air war can do about that.
Well, you're exactly right. And I think any airman would tell you that right off the bat. One of the problems we had in Bosnia, Forrest, was locating the kinds of weapons that are doing precisely today what is occurring in Kosovo. It's difficult to find them. Again, I point out the fact that we have very bad weather a good bit of the time. And even in good weather, finding a mortar or a tank in the trees or a group of soldiers or a handful of thugs going through the streets with rifles and pistols, those are difficult to sort out.
Today, for the first time to my knowledge, a State Department spokesman used the word genocide when talking about what was going on in KosovA. So that provides a certain kind of urgency to moving in there and trying to do something about it. And as nearly as I can tell, as a layman, there's not much they've got that they can do. They don't even have the ground forces available.
Well, I'm not quite certain that there's not some ground forces available. Obviously, there are ground forces in places, and it's a matter of determining that we need them and we want to put them in. One of the concerns that I have, and I've had it for some time, is that at the very outset we obviated the use of ground forces, which I think gives Milosevic some breathing room in terms of his ability to wait out this bombing operation.
How bad is it, do you think, General, at this point?
Well, how bad is the situation in Kosovo?
How bad is the situation for the NATO forces? How do you assess it?
Well, I frankly believe, Forrest, that the NATO forces that are involved in this operation are doing precisely what was expected of them. They're hitting the targets that they were asked to hit, and I think they're probably doing a pretty good job of it. The question is whether or not we are willing to go through that to that step 6. I've been a proponent for a long time that military planners must plan for the worst and pray for the best. Right now, we're seeing the worst. The question is whether or not, and by the way, I'm quite certain that the senior military leadership have advised the political leadership that air power probably will not be able to accomplish this in and of itself, and the potential for ground troops is very, very high.
Well, I appreciate that the military must plan for the worst and hope for the best, but I believe it was also you who said that politicians very often plan for the best and hope that they're right.
That's exactly right.
Might the politicians have put the military into a very difficult position?
Well, I think military leaders are obligated to give the politicians their very best military advice. It then becomes the job of the politician to weigh that advice against the political aims, the strategic aims, what they're willing to commit, and then go forward and give the military their order. And I'm quite certain, Forrest, that the military leaders that we have in the field today are giving their political masters exactly the kind of advice that are needed in terms of air power and the limits on that air power, and what might be required in terms of ground forces.
Senator John McCain, a Republican and of course a well-known Vietnam veteran, said, look, now that we've gone this far, we have got to go all the way. We have got to win this thing, or the NATO alliance itself could be at risk. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. It goes right back to what I call step 1 through 6. You've got to go to the absolute worst possible case in any kind of a military situation, and you've got to weigh the downside of that worst possible case. And then I think the political leadership have got to look at that and decide, are they willing to take that step to get through step 6 and achieve the objective? And if you're not willing to go past step 4 and into step 6, and in this case that may mean ground forces in Kosovo, then you really ought not take step 1. When we've taken step 1, we've got to complete this mission, or we lose all the credibility and we'll never be able to influence events. And we sure as heck aren't going to help the situation in Kosovo.
Admiral, you know this terrain. You know that the Serbian forces are dispersed very well. You know that they are moving against the ethnic Albanians. They are using pistols and rifles, and you know that air war can't do anything about that. Do you believe that ground forces are inevitable?
I would tell you that if there are 3 possible outcomes as far as I can see, maybe a 4th. One of them is we make some move and declare victory and leave, which in fact is not victory. The other one is that we take this thing to some possible higher level of bombing, and I don't know that there's any level that we could get to that would do the job and save the Kosovars or the Albanians in Kosovo. I'm talking now about power plants, distribution system, water distribution, roads, railroads, airports,
yes,
all of which...
10 seconds, sir.
But the bottom line is we could put ground forces in there and may need to put ground forces in there to stop this.
Admiral Leighton Smith, I thank you very much, sir. And of course, we'll be talking to you again as this proceeds.
The White House will say that once U.S. troops are